Hey y'all, welcome to the pre-test pump up. This is our third iteration of this class. It is one of my favorite things that I've been involved with at the Demon, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you. If we haven't met yet, I just said my name is Lily. I am a teacher and tutor here at the LSAT Demon, mostly teach logic games, although I do like every section. And I sort of wanted to talk first, and then I'll turn it over to our other teachers about why this class even exists, right? Like, what is the reason that we are here tonight? And it really comes down to one thing, and it's that when I finished up my LSAT journey, when I sent my applications in, I was thinking back about how it felt to study for the LSAT. And I realized that a lot of that journey felt really lonely. And like, no one in my life really understood what I was going through and how it felt when I got a PT score I wasn't happy with, or how exciting it was to finally get -0 on a section, right? These are things a lot of people in our lives don't have experience with. And also, the test feels like a really big deal, right? It's this thing we have to do. It can get us scholarships, it can get us amazing acceptances. So it feels like a pretty massive weight for the whole time that you're studying. And so when I thought about what might be helpful for our Demon students, I realized that a night where we could come together and talk and just hang out and get some of those feelings of loneliness to maybe go away, for you to see all of the other amazing people who are in the same boat that you are, that would be great. And then also to try to get away from some of that nervous energy that I think tends to creep into us right before an official test. Because as much as we try to tell you, hey, treat your practice test just like the real thing, and we want you to do that, it's never going to quite feel the way it's going to feel when you're finally taking the official one. So the more that we can get you feeling confident and excited to go crush it, the more likely you are to do so, right? I might be making this up, but I think Marissa actually came to one of these classes before she took her official test. So I might just go ahead and start us over with Marissa. If you want to give a quick background, talk about your story, maybe a tip, and then we'll go on to one of our other teachers. But I'll let Marissa take the floor.
Yeah, Lily, I think you totally hit the nail on the head. And it was awesome, like being able to be out on the pre-test pump-ups. I remember we chatted, in the chat and everything, and you were like, just, relax, everything's gonna be fine. And so I'm glad to be on the other side of that now. And yeah, to be able to share a little bit about my story. So yes, I'm Marissa. I also teach logic games. And I took the test in September and I took it in October as well. In October, I got a 173, and that was the pre-test pump. I think, was that the first pre-test pump up? I guess it would have been. That's so funny. Okay, yes. So then I attended that pre-test pump up, and I might honestly throw it over to Brandon next because he told his story, and I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like that, nothing's like that's gonna ever happen to me. And then, of course, the day my test comes, the door handle of my apartment breaks. I can't get in. I have like 5 minutes before my test. I climb in through a window. I take the time, I'm like freaking out, crying on the phone with my mom. She's like, take some deep breaths, put a wet washcloth on your face. There's nothing more you can do now. You're there, sit down, breathe, take the test. And that's what I did. And everything worked out. So just so you know, like hopefully these stories will help to motivate you to that, like, it could be your worst day. You could feel the worst about the test you've ever felt. You could be so stressed out, but you really do fall back on all the training that you've accomplished to this point, right? So you've been practicing, and then you're going to play how you practice. So that's my story. And I don't know if Brandon wants to go next, but I did name him. So
yeah, sure. I'll take it from there. Thanks, Marissa. Yeah, so just to kind of double down on what Marissa said, y'all, I have a funny anecdote I'll share in a second, but I think there's a lot of value as you go in the door, the proverbial door, to this exam. Do yourself a favor and do a little like worst case scenario therapy, like tonight. Just go like run through in your head, like what would be the worst possible thing that happens before you get there. And when you think about that for 5 minutes, you'll go, oh, I'll be alive when it's over. I'll be fine. I still have chances to take it again. Like, you probably should be preparing to take it multiple times anyway. I think it kind of just lowers the temperature a little bit. Is this a really important thing in your law school journey? Of course. And we're not here to tell you that it's not. We're here to tell you, you got this. You're in the right place. You're studying with the right people. You're in the right community. And even if this one time, maybe you went a little earlier than you probably should have, your PTs weren't where they needed to be, or you just have a bad day, you can take it again and it's going to be fine. The schools are only going to count your highest score anyway, and you should be leaning into that, which again kind of goes to my little points. But I'll tell you guys my little anecdote. So I took the test in was this April of last year. I have a toddler who is 3 now, at the time was 2.5, and so I was not able to test in my home. I had to go to a family member's house, which was about a 20-minute drive away, and set up there. Got up nice and early on the day of the exam. I was going to go get my Starbucks and chill out and just like have a nice, couple minutes to myself of peace and quiet from my family before I sat down and did this really big, awesome thing. And the best part about it, I was really prepared. Like my PTs were where they needed to be. I was feeling ready to go crush some arguments and some logic games. And as I'm walking out the door, I look over at the door, and my son, again, who's 2.5, who had fallen in love with light switches around that time, was standing on my laptop bag, reaching up for a light switch. And I did not find this out until I got to my testing site, but he had broken my keyboard. I was completely incapable of using my keyboard, and I had to do the writing sample that day. I obviously had to log into ProctorU. I didn't have any adaptive tech on me. So I sprinted home, 20 minutes back there, and I'm like right on the money. Like if I get back to my house and get the things that I need and drive back to the testing site, I'm going to arrive like right when the test starts. Well, I was on the phone with both LSAT and ProctorU while I was in transit, begging supervisor after supervisor to let me use a wireless keyboard because the only thing else that I had, because my device had been damaged. And finally, I got the right person on the phone and said, okay, fine, you can use it. And I got back to my testing site with 90 seconds on my little ProctorU countdown timer. Like literally sat down in chair, opened up laptop, 90 seconds on the clock. So I say that to tell all of you guys, you're probably thinking, oh, Brandon was really stressed. He probably did shitty. I got a 172. Like I did fine. I did great, really. And I got a score I was pleased with. But I'm telling you that story to remind you, there's just some stuff that's not in your control, y'all. Like it's just the reality of it. Some things are going to go awry. Technology is shitty. You might have a proctor who on their way to be a proctor that day, their car broke down and it's just a bad day for them. Stuff happens. Take it easy on yourself. And I mean that in the most sincere sense. Like take it easy on yourself. Shit happens, but the person who shouldn't have to suffer all that is you treating you poorly, right? Like take a beat, take a breath. You have other opportunities here. So that's my little spiel. I hope that is encouraging to some people and not worrisome, but I'll send it back to Lily, the MC, and we'll go from there. Good luck, everybody.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, Brandon. I've heard it before, but I still can't believe it. I'm going to go ahead, though, and throw it over to Ala. Why don't you tell us your story and maybe a tip you have for us?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I love this class. I think that it's really nice that we do this. It's nice to be able to step away from like the hardcore teaching of like the weekly teaching. I teach 2 classes and all the teachers here teach amazing classes. It's really nice to be able to step away from that and then like try to do sort of a community setting, right? That's awesome. So hi everyone, my name is Ala. I teach classes at the Demon. I teach Plateau Pulverizer and RC processing. I am a little bit of like somebody that studied for the LSAT for a really long time. I studied for 2 years, and that was like over the course of 4 years. So I had to like take time off, life happens. I had to work full time a couple of times. I was working while studying. So I'm sure all the students here are familiar with some version of that. So I studied for 2 years total on the LSAT, and my demons came down to, basically a combination of mental health and learning how to read. I didn't know that I couldn't read before I started studying for the LSAT. I guess I got through like 20 some years of life without knowing how to read. But this test really, really asks you to read for comprehension. It doesn't matter if it's games, LR, RC, doesn't matter what it is. It really, really comes down to learning how to read. That's what we focus on in my Sunday class, at least. And it's really fun to have students come to me and be like, oh, now I'm like better at games because I understand what like either means, or I understand what, how these sentences fit together. So for me, it came down to those 2 things. And once I started like focusing on reading for comprehension, pausing more, my journey started getting a little easier, but it took a really long time. I don't regret it, not for 1 minute. I would do it all over again if I had to. But it just goes to show that if you work at it, you can get where you want to go. The other half of it was my mental health. And I think that that's something probably everybody can relate to some extent. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, the stakes involved, the where I wanted to go. And, you get thoughts about your self-worth, anxiety, nervousness, all kinds of things that I was dealing with on the side. And I thought, oh, okay, that's different. That's my mental health over there. And the LSAT's over here. Those can't be connected. How would one have anything to do with the other? And then you take the test a couple of times, even though I was in a practice test range that I was happy with, the actual test day ended up being like a lot harder for me to actually cope with and go through. So for me, it came down to prioritizing my mental health and seeing it as the same thing. The LSAT is going to be, whatever's happening in your mental health is going to affect you on the LSAT. In fact, because you care about how you do on the LSAT, it's going to affect you more because you have these associations, these links to what you believe your self-worth is, or what maybe other people think of you, right? All of these things are tied in. Once I stopped running away from that feeling and I was like, okay, let's look at this. Let's try to break this down and understand it. Those two things combined together, I would say, is what got me through the saga. And I basically taught myself how to meditate, how to focus, the way I always remember the movie Soul, where he ascends a little bit. That's the feeling you're going for. And once you get that, everything else just feels really easy and fun and enjoyable. And that's why I love teaching the LSAT now. It's the best job in the world. I adore it. So back to you, Lily.
Thank you for sharing that, Alla. And I think you are completely on point with all of that. And I will say, right, very rare chance that you're going to go into the test and feel absolutely no nerves. And that's okay, right? Because being a little bit nervous means that you care, and you should care. This is really important, but it's about not letting those nerves overwhelm you and detract from your performance. That's exactly what happened to me. I took the test 3 times, and my second try, I had really gotten into my own head about, I can't miss more than this number of points in order to get my goal score and all of these things. And I was thinking those thoughts while taking the test, and that was not good. So the more that you can practice, I think this is a big tip all of us would have, the more that you can practice when you feel one of those thoughts or you hear it, taking a deep breath and saying, I acknowledge it, but I'm going to let it go. And I'm going to focus on the question in front of me, the better your score is going to be, right? Because if you just focus on what exactly that sentence you're reading, that question you're answering, it's going to be a lot easier. So thank you for sharing that, Alla. And then we'll move on to Beth, and then we'll close it out with Chris.
Yeah, hey, good to see everybody. My name is Beth. I too am a teacher here at the Demon. I teach some LR classes and recently just started teaching games too. So that'll be fun to get going with it. I love games as well as the other sections, but special place in my heart for the satisfaction of solving a game. So a little bit of my LSAT journey background was just a couple years ago, I got interested in trying to go to law school. Didn't feel super committed to it in a sense that how that played out was I bought a couple prep test books and just kept taking tests without actually learning anything. So I tried that for a little while, took the test basically cold, scored in the 150s, and it was almost like a diagnostic. And 6 months later, I found the Demon because I was going to try to apply with that 150s score. But I found the Thinking LSAT podcast just when I was looking for personal statement advice on Spotify. And luckily I did find them because I started to find out that the LSAT is learnable. And if I actually do care about this and want to commit to this, my legal career starts now and starts with my LSAT. And if I'm a little bit too lazy to study for this test, maybe being a lawyer is not going to be for me. So that was sort of the first mirror that the LSAT held up to me in my own life. And that's sort of what I was thinking about this week. I stayed after class, and one of my classes this week was somebody who is just going to be focusing on their independent studies for a little while. And just has been working hard and hitting the pavement and doing a great job. But after we were talking, I was just thinking about how the LSAT for me has been like a mirror, and kind of like Alla was just talking about with reading. And I saw Marissa say it too, like it mirrored to me and started showing me the ways that I don't know how to read, the ways and things I don't understand and words I don't know, and how passive I am with a lot of things in my life, or even the mirror of like, if I'm not willing to do this, maybe law school is not the right path for me. So that's sort of what led me on my journey towards the LSAT, was just like, who am I going to be? Am I going to expect myself to take the time to study harder and study longer, no matter how long it takes? Or am I going to just wash my hands of it and be done right now? So that unfolded into a 6 to 7 month study journey with the Demon. I did a couple months of live. And then from there, Alla just mentioned it too. Alla and I studied almost every day together for a few months. We would get on FaceTime and argue about LSAT questions. So that really changed things for me too. I ended up taking the test 3 more times until I got a score I was happy with. So I would definitely encourage people, keep taking the test until you're out of attempts, and take it when you're ready. And it doesn't look bad, living proof right here. It doesn't look bad to schools to retake the test, because I have gotten into a handful of schools already this cycle and I'm waiting on more. But other folks here too are applying this cycle and they've seen the same thing. And some of them have done retakes as well. So those are just my tips for you, is just like, the LSAT is going to show you what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And I would encourage you to be honest with yourself, even if you don't want to be with other people. The way that you're going to improve in every single way in your life is to be honest with yourself about what your weaknesses are, so that you can get past them. They might be barriers if you don't understand things on the LSAT right now, or, you haven't fully mastered it, or maybe you have. But it'll keep coming up in your life. And I think the LSAT can kind of mirror like how the rest of your life is going to go. When you encounter something hard, keep going. I think you can do it. Cool. Chris, you got it. Take it away.
Thanks, Beth. So hi, everybody. My name's Chris. I teach whatever classes they'll let me do at LSAT Demon, which right now is LG and RC. Do an ask button in my free time. And I just love working with students in every way I can. So whether this is day 1 with the Demon, or maybe even your very last day with the Demon, potentially, fingers crossed, getting the score you want, I'm super excited to see you here. And so for me, I want to talk about what was my worst test and what was my best test, because it was the journey between those two that really define what success on the LSAT was for me. So I took it 4 times, like a lot of the other teachers here. We were prepared to take it a bunch, and we did take it a bunch. And I can vouch for myself, Beth did as well. That hasn't hurt us so far going through this cycle, the ones of us who have. So I studied with the Demon working full time. So for any older or working students doing that, absolutely doable. So I did live for a couple months, and I waited until my PTs were in an area that I was happy with. Unfortunately, my stumbling block was putting that skill and knowledge that I know I had into action on test day. So the first test I took was below my PT range. And the second test, I was like, oh my goodness, I know I can do this. I've got the knowledge. I've got to knock it out on this test. And so much anxiety started building in my head. The testing environment I was in was great, no issues whatsoever, but my brain was super loud on that day. And I'll always remember, I had I think LG, either section 1 or section 2. The first game just melted my brain somehow. I watched it falling out of my ears onto my keyboard. I had no brain left, and I could not let go of it the rest of the test. I had a full mental breakdown, and my anxiety was just racing. I scored lower than my diagnostic on that LSAT test after 6 to 8 months of study, which was a real blow to the ego and to my self-perception. But really, it was that blow to my ego that I needed to ultimately find success, because I had to be really honest with myself about the way I was studying and the way I was approaching the test. My work on the Demon had shown me I had the knowledge I needed to be successful on the test. Where I needed to grow was in my own mental work, my anxiety, my stress around test taking, specifically the LSAT. No one LSAT is the sole decider of your future in law, your future career, your wealth or worth as an individual. But that's the weight I was putting on it. So to compare, the test where I ultimately scored a 173, I was in the worst testing environment possible. I was studying in my office on a college campus in September during sorority rush season in an office across from all of the sororities doing their opening weekend songs, chants with their new students, clearly audible to me, clearly audible to my proctor. It was a nightmare. But in the time between that test where I totally flopped and this test, what I focused on more than my LSAT content study was my brain state and my ability to manage my emotions and my stress level. So I was so in the zone that day, nothing that could have happened could have thrown me off. The proctor would interrupt, telling me to quiet my environment. I couldn't. It was outside screaming. My proctor would tell me to show the desk in the middle of a section. I did, and I hopped right back in. And I was so focused and so in the zone on the test that I distinctly remember, and I talked about this on a podcast with Nathan, when I finished, I didn't believe the proctor was my last section. I had no idea. I was just in the zone doing questions with myself like it was a PT. And when it was over, I didn't even believe it. I had the proctor double check, like, is the test actually done? Is it complete? Because I thought there must be more. No exhaustion, no fatigue. And so what I want you to know is, based on the work you put in, you've got the skill to do this. You've got the horsepower to run this race. You absolutely can. And so what I'd encourage you to do in the lead up to your test day is find a way to put yourself in the best brain state you can. Manage your stress, manage your emotions, celebrate your journey to this point, and know that your journey can still continue no matter what happens on this test day. So that's my spiel.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Chris. I didn't know about the sorority chants. That's really funny. I will say quickly, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. So I hope you guys have some, that in terms of like a more granular day of test tip that I would have, aside from getting a good night's sleep the night before, is that I like to sort of wake up my brain a little bit. So I don't know if this happens to any of you, but sometimes when you start a section and you haven't done the LSAT that day, it might take a few questions to feel like you're getting in the mode, right? So if that's something you struggle with, then I would say to do what I did, which is to read a reading comp passage the way you would read it on the test, do worlds for a game, maybe read through a few LR questions. You don't even have to answer them. I just want you to get in that mode, sort of make sure your brain is engaged, not to tire yourself out, but just to ensure that you're really firing on all cylinders. So maybe you're someone who can jump in with no issue, but for me, that's what I did on my final test, my most successful test. And I think it made a big difference, both in my nerves, because I was sort of getting out the nerves on the practice questions I was doing, but also in just making sure I was ready to go as soon as the proctor let me. So let's go ahead and turn this over to you. And you guys are what this is all about. So any question, no matter how big or small, we want to help answer. It looks like we have Peter up. So Peter, go for it.
Hey, so I was wondering if there is a distinction between, well, I bet there is, but how to distinguish between like warranted nervousness about the test and unwarranted nervousness about the test. Like if I'm missing like 9 on LR sections and I'm trying to score in the 170s, that's probably pretty warranted. Like I should be nervous about the test. I'm just trying to get a sense of like whether I should actually take this tomorrow. I don't really know if my nervousness is warranted, and I know the test is more than just like kind of a confidence trick. So I'm just wondering if I actually should take it tomorrow. I don't really know how to decide that.
Brandon, I feel like you would have some good advice here. You want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Peter, long time no see. Wishing you luck tomorrow if indeed you do test tomorrow. This goes to you. This goes to everybody. If anyone ever tries to make you feel like your emotions for something are invalid, they're full of shit. The way you feel is valid. You're you. Don't ask for that from anybody. So when it comes to warranted or unwarranted anxiety, what I'm hearing, Peter, and I could be wrong, but what I'm hearing is that you are anxious, and that's normal. That's okay. But if you are anxious, and if you had to sit down and like life was on the line, somebody said, "Why are you anxious about this test, Peter?" And you went, I'm fucking up on LR. I'm missing like 9 on a section, and I know I can do better. If that was your actual answer, then you know what I'm about to tell you. What I'm about to tell you is you probably shouldn't, even though it's going to hurt your wallet to withdraw. You probably shouldn't because of the value of the attempt. The transitive value of that LSAT attempt is worth astronomically more than the $200 you'd have to eat to withdraw it right now. And that's a little tough love, but that is my honest answer. If you're feeling some anxiety right now and you believe it is a reflection of your performance, I think you have to, like Beth was saying earlier, you got to be painfully honest with yourself, because you would be doing future you a massive disservice to cough up those 8 points on a skill gap that you know you have. How regretful would it be to get back a 165 and know you had a 172 in the chamber because you didn't address that gap, or you didn't give yourself commensurate time to address that gap? So
I was sorry. Yeah, thanks, Brendan. I appreciate it. I was using 9 LR questions missed as an extreme example of
sure.
But I didn't actually do that. I never do that. My my practice tests do indicate that I can score very high. The last 5 have all been in the 170s. But I sometimes just mess up game sections, and that really concerns me because I want to make sure that I get all the points I can. I know that games is perfectible. And I probably get I don't know, if you give me some of the older game sections, there are times I'll only finish 3 of the games and I'll just kind of run out of time, and that concerns me. I mean, LR I'm pretty much perfect on every time. RC I feel really comfortable with, and I know I can score really good scores. The games, I know I'm really good at them, but I'm really concerned about them giving me a really, really hard game. And that obviously is capable of really moving your score 5 or 6 points, maybe more so than anything else on any other aspect of the test. So just that concern, I'm just trying to decide if it's warranted or not. I mean, I don't know.
For the sake of other questions, and let me interrupt you here, Peter, just because we've worked together and I know a little bit of your story. Here's the recommendation I would sincerely give you. 1, my dude, you and I have worked on games for several months now. You're ready. I've seen your work. I know where you're at. If you're feeling anxious, let me just be your hype man for a second. Peter's ready for this, y'all. Pete's ready to go. And let's be real, man. You might get that hard one tomorrow. You might get what Chris just described, and you walk in the door and your brain just falls out your ears because it's holy shit, what is this? That could happen. But do yourself the favor of saying, what's the likelihood of that compared to my performance trend? If you're doing 10 sections and 9 of them, you are acing that shit. And then on the 10th one, you just so happen to get 3 perfect and miss 3 or 4 in the last game. Is that a possibility? Sure it is. But you got to play probabilities here, and where your PT range is. And if you can look yourself in the mirror tonight, Peter, and say, I would be pleased with 6 out of these last 7 scores, send it. Go take the test, cash in your points, because I think you're probably there. Now, does that mean walk in and don't be a little nervous? No, it's reasonable. It's very reasonable to feel a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious. But I think that anxiety is more a reflection of you're running out of attempts a little bit, and you have this one area that's a little bit faltery, so to speak. You know what to expect. But at this point, your PTs say you're ready. So my advice genuinely is go get it. The other thing I would tell you is whatever you do, whatever environment you're in where you feel the most confident, I've really been sticking to the word swagger lately. Try to get yourself in a swagger headspace between now and whenever you open that laptop tomorrow. Whatever that looks like. It's not only confident, I'm confident because I earned it. I'm confident because I know this stuff cold. And if I do get a hard logic game, that may suck, but you can't let it derail you. You just got to power through and know that you prepared to the extent that you did for this exam. So I hope that's helpful, Peter. And sincerely, good luck, man. You've got this.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're going to kill it, Peter. Let's go on to Jake.
Hi, so I'm taking it for my first time on Friday, and I was just wondering, my first question is the LSAT rating sample, is that a one-time thing, or every time I take it, do I have to redo it?
One-time thing.
Okay.
So the only reason you would want to redo it is if you realized you really messed something up. You don't want that to be sent to admissions committees. I will say the admissions committees see that writing sample. Depends whether or not they read it, how much they care. The times I've heard admissions committees say they do care is when you have very exceptional writing. Sometimes they'll make sure that, hey, someone didn't ghostwrite your personal statement for you. They just want to make sure you can likewise string together some sentences on the writing portion where they know that was really you. But in general, for most people, the LSAT writing does not come into play at all. I would consider it one of the least important parts of your application. Do a good job, but don't let it stress you out. Maybe do one practice and then be done.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And my other question is, I have this thing on my desk that kind of raises my computer to eye level. Will the proctor get fussy about that, or should I have my computer on my desk?
Brandon, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, just this is more precautionary advice. Let me be clear. I do not have the terms of service of ProctorU sitting here. But what I will tell everybody is a blanket statement just based on my own experiences. If you do not have in writing that you are allowed to have it on your desk, don't put it on your desk. If you don't have a stipulation from LSAC, to be clear, it needs to come from LSAC and then make sure ProctorU gets that. I would get rid of anything not listed in their list of stuff that you're allowed to have. Just don't invite the problem is really my perspective on it. Don't give them a reason to start talking to you and then take time away from your section or derail some other weird thing. And then you're not in the headspace anymore. That's what I'd say.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Brandon. One thing I thought about before my test was, if I'm looking at this room through a proctor's eyes, can I pinpoint anything that might seem suspicious? Because there are some horror stories out there about people whose scores are held for weeks and you don't get them. And that wait for the LSAT score is a tough one. So the more that you can try to think really about what could potentially upset them, the better. Sometimes proctors are more lenient than others. I'll tell you that I took the test 3 times. Every single one of my proctors had completely different reactions and things that they were worried about. But one tip for the proctors that I think is really helpful is to ask them to please stop the clock if they need to speak with you. Now, like I said, all 3 of my proctors had different reactions. So the first one said, oh yeah, sure, I'll stop it. The second one said, under no circumstances will I stop the clock. And the third one said, oh, I won't bother you while you're taking it at all. So there's a lot of possibility for reaction there, but I still think it's really helpful to ask, because it is not fun when a proctor starts speaking and you just are watching those seconds strip off. All right, Cecilia, go for it.
Hi guys. I just want to say all your LSAT stories were super encouraging to me, because this is my 3rd time taking it. I feel like I kind of related mostly to Marissa, where she was taking the October LSAT. I had taken that one, and during halfway through my test, my Wi-Fi just cut out for 40 minutes. And, obviously that was something I couldn't control, but in the time I was just really upset about it. But I ended up doing better than my first test, so that was a little bit encouraging. But I think I'm taking the Saturday LSAT on the 14th. So I just want to know how did you go, or how did any of the LSAT demons, how did you guys go about confronting your weaknesses within the test? Because I feel I can struggle with certain aspects of each section. I don't really know how to grow a lot in one section or the other. So if you have any advice for that, that'd be really nice.
Beth, do you want to take this one to start, and then we can pass over to anyone else who has some advice to share?
I would love if somebody else did, because I was typing in the chat and I just didn't hear it all. I don't want to miss something.
Marissa, you want to take it?
Yeah, I can hop in.
Awesome.
I'm just going to tell Cecilia what Rebecca told me, because I had a similar question when I was studying, and she was like, fake it till you make it. Just act like it is the most interesting thing you've seen in your entire life. For me, especially, it was with reading comprehension. She's like, oh, maybe you're I don't know, on the podcast, they were talking about someone who's a little nervous about science sections or things like that, which we don't break them down like that. But it's if you are nervous about having a weakness in that area, just really throw yourself into it, right? It's a reading comprehension passage. You're not into RC. You're this is the coolest thing I've ever heard of. Let me engage with it. Let me talk back to it, right? Make it a little bit more interactive. So it's not just glaze over. I don't care. I can't get myself focused on this kind of thing, right? So don't know if it's RC or LR, LG for you, but just make it the most interesting thing that's happened to you that day. And I think that was the best advice that I got.
Any other teachers have any advice here?
Yeah, I'll chime in. So I realized, Cecilia, one thing that I was doing as a student when I was studying and some of my early tests was really psyching myself out on sections before they even started or on certain question types. I used to hate parallel questions in LR. Couldn't do them. My brain would just shut down. I hated them. And I used to think there's like something different about parallel questions. Like they exist in a separate category. There's everything else in LR I'm fine with. Then there's parallel questions. They're no different. Really, there are parallel questions that are very easy. There are parallel questions that are very hard. There's hard and easy types of every single question and every section you can find. What I realized the only problem with parallel questions was me psyching myself out as soon as I saw them on the page. Like I kind of get a hint when I saw the text on the page, lot here, lot here, lot here, lot here. I'm like, oh man, that's parallel. I'd already tune out and my stress would go. So what I became good at, Cecilia, was recognizing in myself the signs of my pre-stress and my pre-anxiety and checking in with myself often, active mind. And so when I felt emotions, I wanted to see them coming quickly so I could kind of nip them in the bud before they got out of control. And then realize that I've been studying this for a long time. I've made significant improvement. I can do these things. There's not a single question type or section that I haven't gotten right. So I can do this and you can too. So I would not psych yourself out in the lead up. You absolutely can. You can do this.
Thank you. That means a lot.
I think that was great advice. I will say one thing I did was I knew I kind of sucked at LR, and I felt like that was in my first test where I probably lost the most points. And so I did a section of LR every single day leading up to that second test. And I felt like that really showed me not only patterns, but also my areas of weakness in that section. So certainly not something everyone must do. It just worked for me because it felt like I was really attacking those danger areas that I saw in my own performance. So thank you for asking that, Cecilia. That was great. Let's go on to Naaman.
Oh, hey guys. Yeah, so Saturday will be my fourth, and I stopped doing PT and just started doing sections, and off of sections, I feel like I should be, all I do is like, I go to sleep on my sofa and I just come here and I practice LSAT. That's what I do now. That's why there's a bed back there. But I have a bedroom. Do I like, if my sections on themselves are indicative of the score that I want to get, is it okay to use that kind of indicator? And in terms of like the day of, I know that like on a daily basis, if I warm up with some questions, I tend to perform like a lot better on sections. So do you guys have advice in terms of the gap maybe that you should keep between doing those, doing the warm up and then like doing the actual exam?
Can I take this one, Will? Yeah, just as it's good to see you, Naaman. As far as the section question goes, as like a little preamble to my response here. So you know this about me, Naaman, some of you don't. I'm dyslexic, which means it's hard for me to read lots of stuff in bulk over a long period of time. So I really heavily leaned on sections as opposed to PTs as my benchmarks. Sections were telling me kind of where I was. Now I did intersperse, the occasional test in there, the occasional PT, just again, as a benchmarking metric, but my study was far more heavily suited for sections because I could review more succinctly. I could review more carefully, more thoughtfully. So what I'll say, Naaman, is if your sections are consistently adding up to a PT aggregate score that you would be pleased with, that will get you to law school for free, I think you're probably in good shape. There's a little asterisk on that and saying, if you're planning to take the test this weekend, maybe don't take a PT right now. But assuming something doesn't go the way you want, it might be worthwhile just seeing that to see if there is some endurance element. I don't tend to believe that enduring the test is a real thing. I think students often use endurance as kind of a mask for, they don't have understanding, so they lean into this idea that they get too tired, or the fourth section's too hard, or they had 2 RCs, so they got exhausted. I buy like 5% of that, and I think it's mostly excuse. All that to say, I think your sections, if they are telling you section to section that you're ready, I think you should go ahead and sit the exam, assuming that it is within your score range that you want to get to go to law school for free. We also have a great free tool in the footer of the Demon called our score converter. You can go in there, if any of you don't know about it, you can go in there and add your raw section scores or upload your raw section scores and translate those raw section scores to what your PT performance would be on every LSAT for which we have data. So you can use that as sort of a transitive way to find out, okay, if all you're doing are sections, because that's what you have time to do to thoughtfully review, you can still see what that would translate to in a real PT. That being said, Naman, I think you're probably there. We've worked together some, and I know your sections are getting where you want them to be. So if you do sit the exam, good luck.
Okay, sweet, thanks. Yeah, it's just, you know, every now and then that section that ends up not being close to perfect, which is like not totally frequent. It gets me scared, but then I know that like usually that's because I'm not warmed up, or I didn't like fix myself like mentally or something. But yeah, it should be good.
Can I follow up on that one too, just real quick? So
Yeah.
demon teachers, help me out here. Show of hands, who didn't get a 180 who works at the demon? All of us, everyone here. So when you say the word perfect, Naman, I hesitate to say, don't fight your way to perfect as if it's some ideal to be realized. We all still scored in the high 99th percentile, and we still all fucked things up on our real test. Embrace that a little bit. You're ready.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I do want to quickly say one little caveat to Brandon's point, which I think was great, and I don't think this is Naman, but I realized that I was scared of PTs, and that's why I wasn't taking them. So I tried to tell myself, oh, I just don't have time. I'll do the time sections. But really, it was a fear that I'm going to feel bad about myself and not be able to succeed if I get a bad PT score. And this is the thing, guys, practice test scores really fluctuate. So you were going to have a range. That's why we tell you not to start taking the official test until you're scoring in that range, and then not to stop taking the official test until you get the high end of that range. So for me, I had to confront the fact that I was really fearful of what a bad PT score would do to me mentally. And I had to start taking PTs. So again, I don't think that was what your situation was whatsoever. But if that is you and you're sort of doing time sections, but scared to see that official PT score, snap out of it, right? It's okay. All of us have a bad day. All of us get some bad PT scores. It's about consistently pushing yourself and moving your range higher up so that no matter where you score on test day within that range, you'll feel pretty good. And then if it wasn't at the high end, you just take it again. So wanted to throw that in, but let's go on to Katie.
Hi, I am like in a very unusual spot, not really a spot that I want to be at, but unfortunately a spot I have to be at. I am, like all of us, aiming to be on the higher end of an LSAT test taker, and I am having to take my exam. Right now I'm like scoring in the 160s. And I absolutely have to take it because unfortunately I like just can't afford to move it. I just financially can't. And I'm just wondering how I can kind of use the fact that I'm taking that test to like think about it like positively or something. Like what mental space can I use in a good way? You know what I mean? How can I weaponize that?
Yeah, someone want to jump in here? If not, I can take it. All right, I'll take it. That's a great question, Katie. Every person is different. So sort of the things that we struggle with, our specific anxieties are going to differ. So for you, I would say find the areas of life or the things that you do that make you feel confident and comfortable, and see if you can translate those to the test. So whether it's the environment, like maybe you need something really specific, even to be wearing, right? Like the clothes that we have on can have an impact on our mental state. So try to think about what gets you more anxious and eliminate that. And then in terms of just really psyching yourself up, I think it comes from doing things like this, right? Talking about the test, talking about those fears. Chris said it earlier, or maybe it was Brandon, about imagining the worst possible day. And guess what? You're still going to be okay, right? This test is important, but it is not the end all be all. And there are a lot of great people in amazing law schools who didn't do their best on the test, and maybe it was their last attempt, and they write their way in, right? Like they're able to show that, hey, my test is not an accurate reflection of my ability. So that's not the situation we want anyone to be in. But if it's one that you find yourself in, there are certainly ways to make yourself still a really attractive candidate.
It's my first attempt also.
Okay, awesome.
Which is
so
great.
Yeah, you have a lot of time ahead of you. So if you need to take some time and get some more money to take the test again, that's an option. I say to treat this one as practice for the next. So even if you're not officially signed up for the next test, pretend, right? Let's talk ourselves into this, that this test is just gearing you up to get ready for the next one. So you're taking this official test, knowing there's going to be another, and that can take a little bit of the stress off because you don't feel like you have to be one and done. So I know that's probably not perfect advice, but I hope you can take bits and pieces from that. But Katie, you and I have been working together for a long time. I think you're going to rock it. And I'm stoked to see what happens. So let us know.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
One of the things I think for like mindset that was really helpful for me is pausing after, especially if it was an LR section, it was really helpful, is to look at the first question and recognize that it's like something that you've seen hundreds and hundreds of times before. Just noticing that it's exactly like a practice test, it kind of like settled my nerves on the official day. And I was like, oh, this is just confusing correlation and causation. I've seen this before. This is exactly like something that I've seen before. And if it's a game, oh, they just want me to put 6 things into order. I've done this before. So when you remind yourself that this situation is like every other situation you've seen before, that sort of amygdala response of anxiety kind of gets really toned down, and you're like, okay, I've literally done this before. It is doable. And I think that helps with framing your mind to perform the way you do on a practice test.
I think that's great, Ala. Let's move on.
Thank
Jawad,
you guys so much.
Oh yeah, thanks, Katie. And am I saying your name right?
Yeah, you got it. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Lily. Well, hello, everybody. Best of luck for everybody who's taking the LSAT either this week or in the upcoming near future. But for me, this will be my 3rd time taking the LSAT. I've seen a few other students will be retaking it as well sometime soon. But for me, I've had 2 issues I noticed between last time and the very first time I took it, which was that I end up taking too much time. For me, I usually like to take my time when it comes to answering questions, but sometimes I feel that the time runs out. So what are your guys' suggestions as far as time efficiency?
Brandon, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I could tell Lily could feel me ready to attack. Forgive me. Pronounce your name for me one more time. I got you lost in the mix with Katie there. Was it Jawad?
Jawad, yes, sir.
Jawad, yeah. So Jawad, you're never going to hear somebody at the Demon try to pitch you theory about time efficiency. And honestly, what you just described about how you take too much time sounds like you're taking exactly as much time as you need, frankly. And that is kind of our pitch here at the Demon, is the way that you're going to perfect this exam, because it is very perfectible, is to take the time you need to understand what you're reading. And speaking for the neurodivergence in the room, I can tell you RC was like my worst enemy on this exam until I realized that dyslexia was actually my superpower, because it was forcing me to go slowly. And then I started to adopt some of the small, very thoughtful, very effective techniques that we teach here at the Demon for reading for understanding, which is, treat those commas, colons, and em dashes as an invitation to pause and reflect on the clause you just read or the sentence you just read and what it actually means, not only on its own merits, but in the context of whatever else that you're reading. So I would be very cautious of at this juncture, especially going into your 3rd attempt, to try to be thinking about the clock as an aspect of this test that you want to game. It's not there to be gamed. It's there to tick down and be a standardized measure for the score distribution. What you're really being tested on is, do you understand what you're reading, and are you able to apply certain basic principles off of that understanding? The way you beat the clock on this test is reading so stinking carefully that you can tell the 80% of it that's wrong why it's wrong, and the 20% of it that's right why it's right. So I would be leaning very hard into an accuracy first mindset and trying to basically treat the clock as if it doesn't exist. That is I can't recommend enough. We have a relatively old blog post, but it's still a very useful one, about a little anecdote about Ms. Accuracy versus Mr. Speed. It's a post that Nate wrote a long time ago, but the story is just as useful today as it was, 18 months ago when it first got published. The concept is accuracy beats speed, period. Like, we're not trying to sell you anything proprietary. It's in the math. The math just doesn't support that the clock is there to be gamed. Read, understand what you've read, and then go tell the 4 things that are wrong, why they're wrong, and the 1 thing that's right, why it's right. It really is that simple in the aggregate.
That's great, Brandon. Any other teachers want to jump in on that?
I just want to say, like something that has been really, something that was really helpful for me that Nathan says is like, if you're going to speed up, you're almost guaranteeing that you're not going to get paid for the work that you did, right? Like the time that you're investing in getting the question right, when you get the question right, that's you getting paid. If you're speeding up and you still need more time to answer the question correctly, you're not getting paid, right? You're getting the question wrong, and it's only going to hurt you in the long run, right? You should get as many questions right as you can. You should get paid as much as you can, right? And that's your time investment.
Yeah, that's a great point, Marissa. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's go on to Drew. What's your question? Oh, can anyone hear Drew?
No, I don't have him right now.
I think you might be muted.
Sorry, Drew, we can't hear you. Maybe type it in the chat and we'll get to it as a group. Sorry about that. Let's go to Sam.
I didn't really have any questions. I just wanted to thank you guys, the teachers. It's been really great going to your classes. I realized when I was studying on my own before the demon that I could understand the passage, but I was completely lost at what the question was actually asking me to do. You know, and I think the point of you realize you can't read, like, yeah, you do realize that you absolutely can't read, and just rereading it slowly again and over really was a boost in like my confidence. So I just wanted to thank you guys, and also specifically thank you, Chris, because it was his podcast episode that was how I even found the demon, and then he was even convinced, because I think Beth was also on one of them too, and then it like let me was like, okay, I'll go do the live classes, and it was really beneficial. So thank you.
That's awesome, Sam. Yeah, Beth and Chris have some great podcast episodes. I think they're Demon Daily eps. So if you don't listen to Demon Daily or to Thinking LSAT, I highly recommend it. Sometimes when I wasn't, able to study, I would just listen to those episodes, and it felt a little bit like I was doing something LSAT-y, right? So highly recommend. Those are super fun time, and they have a lot of great tips. Okay, let's go on to Cedric.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Or okay, I was wondering, this is kind of almost a time related question as well, but it's about like, how do you know when you should skip a given question? When I'm doing reading comp, there's often like questions like, when the author said this or use this word, what they mean, and on the demon it highlights the word, but when I took the actual test, I took it once before, like it doesn't. So I'm like, should I skip this and come back to it when I have more time to try to figure out what exactly they're talking about? Or should I even with logic games, if I feel like I have to do a lot of like individual like for a given question, I have to do a lot of individual plugging in of answers, should I like skip that question and come back to it? Or like, what is the best way?
Yeah, someone want to jump on this one?
Yeah, I can. So really anything that is highlighted in the daemon mimics the function that is on LaHub where you'll be taking the test. So there shouldn't be anything that isn't highlighted there that would be highlighted here, or vice versa. So that should translate. And what I tell you, Cedric, is what I tell my students in class. The way to succeed at these questions on the LSAT, whether it's LG, whether it's RC, whether it's LR, is doing all the work you need to understand before looking at the questions whatsoever. Oftentimes in my RC classes, I comment on how similar reading and understanding an RC passage is to making worlds in LG. The worlds in RC just represent the purpose of the passage and the different POVs that we see in the passage. Understanding that every question on there is really a must-be-true question, we can build those worlds before we even enter. We can speak to the argument the author's making, we can speak to the POVs that we encounter, we can do all that work. Just like in logic games at LSAT Demon, we tell students to build worlds, which is doing all the work you need to for a game before getting to the questions. So really, you're doing all that work on the front end. The question is kind of the reward, the payoff for the work that you put in. And so we don't tell students to skip questions on the LSAT. We tell you to take the time you need to understand that question and answer it effectively.
Can I add something?
A lot of times, I think this happens once a week in my classes, we actually predict the questions themselves. That is one of the things that starts, it seems like it magically happens, but it's not magic. When you read effectively, when you read for comprehension, you start picking up on the details they're giving you, the evidence that they're providing for the argument that they're presenting to you. And when that happens and you start seeing it like a story, like a structure that you're building in front of you, it's like a mind map from Sherlock. Like that's essentially what you're doing in your mind. You're building a mind map of the passage. And when you do that, and the way that we read in my classes is I want you all to be able to answer any question at all about the passage. It doesn't matter that it's the next 6 or 7 that you're going to get. I want you to be able to answer any question, which is why when we go through it, we're like, oh, they made like an interesting comparison there. Maybe there'll be a question about it. And it generally happens once a week in my classes. So when you read for comprehension, just like Chris was saying, you actually end up taking it all in such an effective way that everything else looks terrible but the right answer.
Such a great point, Ala. And this also comes into play with games. Almost every day that I teach games, we make an inference, and I'm like, I would bet money they're going to ask us about that, right? So this is something that comes up in every section, this ability to predict, this ability to think ahead and understand, hey, I've done this enough now that I really see where this is going to go. And that's when you can start building that confidence that should hopefully buoy you on test day. Let's see, there's a good conversation about Control F in the chat, and I want to throw out some caveats. So it's absolutely allowed, but I think some of our teachers might have some, things to think about when using it. So if anyone wants to jump in on that, go ahead.
I'll just say for RC, it can be helpful if they're asking you about a specific quote or a specific sentence. It's like can be an easy way to find it, but I wouldn't want that to take away from your comprehension. I want you to understand the passage up front. I wouldn't want you to think, oh, this answer choice has this word. I couldn't find it in the passage, so it's not the answer. That would be you essentially relying on Control F as a help to understand, especially when they oftentimes will use synonyms all the time in answer choices because they're checking for comprehension. They want to see if you understood. And if you understood something, you'd be like, yeah, that's very similar to what they said. That's synonymous with what they said. That's the answer. So I wouldn't want you to rely on it to check if something's the right answer because it has that word in it. You want to look for comprehension, but it can be helpful to be able to find things in a very basic way.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Chris just said in the chat. I agree with this theory that some of those reading comp wrong answers might be written to see if that's what you're doing, if you're relying on Control F. And it's going to be really easy to get a potentially easy question wrong because you wanted to go perhaps the easy way and not have to really read the passage. So I just wanted to say that. The kind of cool way to use Control F though, especially if you're someone who has trouble slowing down, is that you can actually Control F for periods and for commas. And what that will do is it will highlight every time there's a comma or a period in the passage. And that way you're actually getting a real visual block when you hit a period or a comma, right? It's telling you, hey, this is a time where I should probably check in with myself and make sure I've understood that sentence, that clause that I just read. So if you're using it to help ensure that you continue to understand and engage with the work, I think it's great. If you want to use it as a way to not have to do the work, that's when it becomes problematic. So I wanted to say that. It looks like we are right at time for the class. So I'm going to hang out. Maybe some other teachers will. We'll keep answering questions, but you guys have been awesome. I really appreciate you being here. And I hope that all of you know that all of us at LSAT Demon are rooting for you. We want the absolute best for you. And any way that we can help, please let us know. You can always reach out to me, lily@lsatdemon.com. I'm happy to chat with you. But let me just be the first to say good luck this weekend. You're going to go kill it. So I am going to now open it back up. I'm not going to stop the recording in case we have some more interesting questions people want to watch later. But of course, if you need to head out, no problem at all. So anything else, guys?
I see Drew is now on his phone and we weren't able to get to him earlier. Perhaps we could
great,
start
yeah.
with his question from a minute ago.
Yeah, Drew.
Yeah, is the sound working now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, sorry, my laptop's not great. I actually had a question for Chris specifically if he's still here. So my LSAT thing in August, I took it, I scored in like the upper 160s, which is realistically, that's probably what I should have scored. And then for whatever reason in October, I I took the test, did the first 2 sections, came back, and then for whatever reason, that logical reasoning section, every single question just looked like I couldn't figure it out no matter what happened. And there could have been a bunch of reasons for that. I mean, it was at 8 a.m. and I'm a senior in college, and that's probably not my normal body clock. But I just want to know, I feel like I'm in a really good headspace right now to take the test. Like, I feel confident. I'm kind of in the phase where I'm just over the stress. And I just want to know, like, how do you keep that going? And just like when you were taking the test, how did that help?
Yeah, well, that was awesome hearing your story because it matched mine exactly. My scores were 165 to 159, then 169, and finally 173. And just like you described, when I hit that 173, it was after really protecting my headspace. And so my advice to you would be to recognize that protecting your headspace, keeping low stress, that's an active effort. At least it is for me. And so that's something I had to protect and guard, my good mood and my good headspace. And so the way that I did that is by getting practice recognizing the signs in my body and in my breathing, in my mind that were indicative of me feeling stressed out or feeling like I'm starting to get a little anxious or noticing that I kind of read that passage a little too fast because I really just wanted to get to the answer. So after concentrating on that through my study and keeping an active mind thinking about those things on test day, as soon as I saw an inkling of one of those thoughts or behaviors, squashed it. Because what I noticed is when I let those behaviors grow, they'd kind of blow up and then my test day would blow up. So I'm confident. It sounds like you're in the best headspace you could be going into this. I think you've mastered this. Keep doing it through your test and make that an active effort. And you'll probably have a story just like mine. You'll have my job here in a couple of weeks, I'm sure.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Jaystri, go for it.
Hey, thanks everybody. I just wanted to kind of similar to Sam, thank all the teachers. I did have a couple questions. So like one of the questions kind of related to like your like space that you write it in. I don't know if you guys would know this for sure, but would like if you have like if your doors are kind of like that frosted glass, so you can't really like see through them, like maybe like figures of people, but you can't actually see through them, like and any like actual details. Would that possibly get flagged or no? Or in your opinion?
I actually,
oh yeah, Marissa, no, go for
I
it.
actually have that in my apartment. And like, I didn't have an issue. I just kept them shut. And like, I don't know how much like space there is, but I like closed the curtains in that room so that there weren't like shadows coming through, but I just kept the sliding doors shut and they didn't say anything about it. The frosted doors shut. Yeah.
Yeah, because like where I'm writing it, it's like I'm not writing it at home. Ironically, writing it in the law office, so I'm like hoping that'll give me some kind of manifestation and indirectly. But like the doors and like the rooms are like frosted doors, so I was like wanting to ask that. And then the other question are like, do you guys have any tips as far as so I did like the proctor practice on the weekend and like tried like Nate's meditation techniques over the like the break part. Any other like tips or tricks on ways you can kind of utilize that break to kind of like recenter yourself kind of going into that second half?
Box breathing. It's your best friend. Box breathing is your best friend. Even if you're like, I wouldn't even eschew it to the breaks. I would say between games, between passages, if you find that, you know, man, that last LR problem was a real sucker. Like that sucked. I don't know if I'm in the right headspace. Just take a second. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, and then go attack. There's a lot of science behind that breath. You're bringing fresh oxygen up to your brain. You're sort of flushing the proverbial toilet on the bad thoughts that were there a second ago. And that's part of it. It's a very useful technique. On every time I sat the exam, between every RC passage and every logic game, whether I felt the urge to go attack the next thing or not, what's a total of 16 seconds on my RC section, right? Like 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, and I'm going to be a lot more mentally comfortable with what I'm about to read. So can't recommend that one enough.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
echo that as well. I actually did it in between every question. It really, I mean, it sounds like, wait, it really doesn't. Just a deep breath between every, I didn't do like the seconds out breathing, but I closed my eyes and took a deep breath between every question.
Mhm.
And I highly recommend it because I think the science of it is that it brings blood to your prefrontal cortex, which is the decision-making part of your brain. And the decision-making part of your brain is kind of necessary and useful on the LSAT. So that's what it does, and it like resets it really well. And I did it in between every single question, and it was very nice to have that like rhythm as I was taking the test.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say about that breath is that when it takes the blood to your prefrontal cortex, do you know where it takes it from? It takes it from the amygdala, which is the area of fear and anxiety. So it's a double win, right? You're getting blood to the part of your brain that's going to help you do better, but you're taking blood from the part of your brain that's making you feel anxious. So I think that's great advice, Ala and Brandon. Katie,
thank you guys.
Yeah, Jayashree, did that answer everything?
Yeah, no, that was awesome. And also just quick, like, shout out Lily, because like I first started with the demon and like you made me feel really comfortable with like the test and just being a part of the demon. So like big shout out to you.
Oh, you're an amazing student. I literally can't wait to hear about how much you killed this test. I'm gonna miss you when you kill it, but whatever.
And I'm kind of sad. I'm like, I kind of want to keep taking classes after. I'm like, even though it's already written, like, you know what I mean?
Well, come join us as a demon teacher. Just knock it out of the park, and then you can come be our best friend.
I appreciate it.
Let's go on to Katie.
Can I get skipped for a second? I gotta close the door. Somebody opened it.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Let's go to Celine.
Hi. So for me, I think we talked about this a lot, but I think that like my score, like even this is my first time taking it, but my like anxiety really like takes its toll on this, and I'm like afraid that it will. And so I just wanted to see like other than like the breathing in and out, do you guys recommend like going out like trying to get like a breath of fresh air, like anything like that like helped you guys, like even if it's like before the test, the day before, anything like that that's like helped you like do better?
I was just chatting with somebody about this after class a couple days ago. That's going to be dependent on what feels good for you. Honestly, I was talking with somebody after class the other day, and we were talking about exactly that. Like, what feels good for me might not be exactly what feels good for you. Like, yeah, things like sunshine and going outside, that's going to be like a booster for everybody, like scientifically. But maybe you live somewhere gloomy, or maybe it'll be a rainy day. So what's going to feel good for you? Like this week before you take your test, is it reading? Do you want to spend some time reading? Do you want to spend some time watching some shows or movies that make you laugh? Is it spending time with people that you love and care about you? Exercise, you know, in the ways that you do and that feel good for you, hanging out with your pets, you know. So that really is my best encouragement for you with that question, is just think about, even just this week before the test, make a list of the things that feel good for you personally. And if there's some of them that are really small, maybe you'll have time to do one of them in your break time too.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
thank you
that's
so much.
great advice, Beth. The other thing I did was I ate a snack in the middle. It's kind of a long test, so I wanted to like not pass out. So I drank some water, I ate a snack, I pet my dogs. I tried not to think about the test too much during that break, like not to overthink the questions I'd done. Although I will say on my second test, when I felt like I had just totally bombed the first half, I literally had to give myself a pep talk during that one, kind of like slap myself in the face a little bit. So when you take it enough times, each break feels a little bit different. But yeah, just do what kind of is going to get you back and raring to go kill that second part.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Celine. Let's go back to Kate.
Okay. I have a couple questions. Okay, so the first one, can you guys hear me? Okay, the first one, what happens if you're not back before the break ends? Like, did the proctor just start without you and you lose your time, or will they wait for you for a little bit?
Yeah, so I would say just don't let that happen. Just be back on time. If there's some sort of emergency, that's a different story, and you could probably get in touch with LSAT, but I just wouldn't even worry about that, really. You shouldn't be going too far away from where you're testing. The much bigger potential concern, and that I've heard a lot, is to be prepared to have to wait on your proctor. So usually the biggest wait times are when you're trying to get on to start the test and when you come back from your break. So I would be much less worried about me getting back to my testing location, and much more worried about how am I going to react if I have to sit here for 30 minutes, for an hour and a half waiting for my proctor? How am I going to stay locked in? How am I not going to let the anxiety get to me? Do I have LSAC's phone number? Do I have the phone number for Proctor U? You should have that already in case something like that happens. Now, I didn't ever have an issue like that. It was totally fine, but we have heard that story a few times. So I just want to say to sort of prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I also wanted to ask about, you were saying that you ate something. I'm also like planning to like eat something. I like, what does anybody have time to eat? Like you can't heat anything up. Like, what did you eat? What can I eat? I have 15-minute breaks. But even that, like, it's like, okay, like I need to microwave something and then I need to cut it and then I need to put it in my mouth, like, and then I need to put my dish away and then I need to come, like, I'm like, this seems
no,
like,
don't put that on yourself. I just had a granola bar. That was it. Just to get a few calories in, something in my stomach. I would not try to cook a meal. That seems very stressful. So yeah, just a granola bar or something similar to that. That's handheld. It's easy. You know, won't upset your stomach if you're feeling a little anxious. That's how I would lean. Maybe some of the other teachers have different suggestions there, but I would say to keep it nice and simple.
Okay, if nobody else has a suggestion for that. Last one. Okay. I was just wondering if anybody has ever taken the test with a pet in the room. I like called Elsa, like the people who've taken class with me, they know that I have a bird. She's here right now. And she's very quiet most of the time, but she is very needy. She always wants to be with me. And if she's not with me, she's screaming about it. And so I called LSAT when I first started studying, like to find out, like, hey, is it okay if my bird is with me, like, while I take my test? And I'm like, yeah, it's probably fine. Like, I don't see why that would be an issue. And then I called LSAT more recently, and a different person told me that that's not okay. And then, yeah, so people are saying that, like, online, yeah, that was me. A different person said that, online it says, like, if a pet wanders into the room, you just have to focus and, like, not lose the screen, but, like, it's a different thing. I was wondering, yeah, has anybody taken a test with a pet in the room?
So I haven't, but something I would just be concerned about is the difference between like a cat and a dog and a bird, is that a bird is going to sound potentially more like words or like speaking, especially if it gets kind of jumbled to the proctor. I would be concerned that they would flag my test potentially. Now, if you explain that it's a bird and they say it's okay, then I think that's fine. But the fact that you've sort of had a few different takes on it would make me try to see if there's any way that I could take it without a pet in the room. But maybe others have different suggestions. And if not, I'm sure if you make it very clear that that's what it is and you're upfront about it, could potentially be all right. But I would say to see if you could get away from the bird just for the test. But anyone else have any ideas here?
My only thing that I would say, I created my dog for my tests, and there was one test specifically where she cried during the second half of it, and even that was enough for me to be like, you are my animal and I feel a lot of compassion for you, and I feel really bad that you're like upset and missing me. And it made me, like, the next test create all sides of her crate so that wouldn't happen again. So that would be like my warning to you, is just, if that's something that alerts to you that, like, my pet needs attention, that might not be where you want your attention going as well.
Brandon, you just made a good point in the chat. Do you want to say it?
Yeah, just whether it's technology or whether it's pets or some sort of accommodation, you've heard me say this before, Katie, but get that shit in writing and make sure your proctors acknowledge it. Like, because Lily's proctors and my proctors were almost certainly different people. And we both had several on all of our test administrations. You know, you might have 3 during the same exam, like 3 or 4. And each one of them has had a completely different day's experience today. If the first 3 are great and the 4th one popped a tire on the way to work that morning and your bird makes a noise in your 4th section and they just want to be pissy about it, they might do something about it. you have to be prepared for like that level of weirdness and negativity. And that being said, I would just I would ask LSAC very respectfully, like, hey, I spoke with someone here. They said this is acceptable. I would like to have that communicated in writing so that I may provide that to ProctorU during my test. And like, if you have that credential with you and they try to flag you for it, if nothing else, LSAC will go, oh yeah, but we emailed her. Like she has it on paper that we said yes. So even if you do get flagged, you'll have a strong leg to stand on, and it's not like it's going to hurt your score release or anything like that. So call them up, get them on the phone tomorrow and say, hey, just want to be crystal clear about this, and I want to make sure ProctorU has a copy. And I think you'll be good.
That's great advice. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Katie. Let's go to Polina and then Jayashri, and then maybe we have time for one or two more, and then we'll call it there.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for doing this. My question is, I'm a mature student. I have kids and I have very limited time to study. I've only allocated about 3 months of studying, and I've been trying to do it every day, but it hasn't been really consistent. Long story short, I feel like I'm entirely unprepared for this Saturday's exam, but due to my circumstances, I'm not really in a position to cancel or reschedule. I also am not shooting super high because the school in my area, the average LSAT scores are not typically above a 165. So my question is how do I overcome this worst case scenario fear of, if I don't do well on this exam and I don't get into school during this cycle, like, is my life gonna end, or, like I have to do this for my family kind of thing? Like, how do I overcome that?
That's a great question. Does anyone want to jump in here?
I can weigh in on this one too, just because I'm in a similar scenario. I feel like I'm monopolizing a lot of time. So if anybody else wants to weigh in, I really don't want to do that. But Polina, first of all, I'm a dad. I like to tell people I'm on my 10th gap year from college. Like, I get where you're at. I really do. I can't empathize with your unique situation, but the broad brushstrokes, that's very reflective of what I had to deal with myself. What I will tell you is if you are really hell-bent on this sort of like local or regional school path, because that's what's good for you and your family, I can't encourage you enough to stick with that. What I think you're going to get from all of us at the Demon is if your practice tests aren't reflecting what it's going to take to get into that school for free or on a significant scholarship, it's actually going to be in you and your children's best financial interests to wait and apply next September. And I mean that sincerely, knowing that that is very hard advice to hear, especially when you're 48 hours from a test administration. I ignored that advice myself previously, and then discovered what my cycle results were, and then took that advice separately and ended up getting multiple full ride offers, even as a super splitter. Like, I mean, my GPA is horrible. I can almost guarantee it's worse than yours. And what I'm saying is, I took that extra year, and in today's economy, this is an easy thing for me to say, as a tech savvy white dude, there are lots of ways to make money right now in this gig economy as like side hustles. So if it's a financial constraint, if it's challenges like that, go check out gig sites like Upwork or Fiverr or TopTal. You can make $40 an hour writing web copy for people right now, and doing nothing more than asking ChatGPT a question that they ask you and then editing it. You can get paid $40 an hour for what you would be doing now for LSAT study to bridge the gap between this cycle and next cycle. If there are financial constraints really pushing you to feel like you must apply now. But as a guy who's paid off 6+ figures of medical debt, which is the only debt worse than student debt, I implore you not to make that financial mistake with a subpar LSAT score. If there is room in your story to get to next cycle and study even a little bit more to up that LSAT score. And I say that from a deep place of sincerity. It's really important to me, especially for young parents, not to take on potentially intergenerationally effective debt. Like, we're talking in some cases, even in state schools, $100,000, $120,000. That is, you'll have liens on your house. Your ability to service that debt with the jobs that are generally offered to even the highest performers at those regional schools is going to be very limited. And I think a lot of people jump in without really looking through all the facets of that financial prism. And you may have, I want to be very clear, I'm not trying to preach at you here. You might have drank the demon Kool-Aid full Monty, but you will be doing your future self and even the lives of your children just financially a major service if there is room to punt till next cycle and really up that score.
Are there any negative repercussions from, you know, like if I was to apply this cycle with a not so great score, would that reflect on me next cycle? So I'm not really familiar with that process.
Yeah, so law schools do what's called rolling admissions. This is very common in graduate schools. What that means is the folks like the Demon teachers here who all applied in September, we got not only our acceptances almost exclusively ahead of the students who will be taking this exam and then applying thereafter, but we also got offered the scholarship dollars from each of these schools. You know, imagine it like a debit account. They make a projection each year on what they need in tuition dollars to operate, and then they begin to give out merit packages, which are really just thinly veiled discounts to try and attract top talent to raise their proverbial rankings. And they do that very early in the cycle because they know how often they have to compete with other top schools to secure that talent. And it is like a debit account. Once those dollars have been attributed to student A, B, or C, student D, even if they are a categorically superior student, does not get an offer because the dollars just aren't there anymore. And if they do get an offer, it's usually conditional, it's usually low dollar. So it puts you in an even more stressful position because not only do you have to compete with these peers who are essentially going for free and whose scholarships the proverbial you is financing via debt, but in those scenarios, your conditional scholarship means you have to work twice as hard just to keep what was given to you in the same ways that they weren't asked to do that. And that just builds this culture of resentment and competition amongst members of the class that really doesn't need to be there, especially at regional schools where those top seats are really the only ones that get those high ranking jobs. So there's a game to be played here. And again, I implore you, do even like a small amount of research in the Demon podcast files. You'll learn a lot with just a tiny bit of listening. And I think it really will set you up for a much stronger financial position. And you don't have to flush the toilet on law school. You can still go. Just 1 year more might set your family up for a lifetime of financial security that going this year could really screw. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And good luck. If you do take the test, good luck.
Thank you.
All right, let's close it out here with Jayashree.
Yeah, thank you. We were kind of talking a little bit about it in the chat, but like talking to your proctor. I know Marissa, you mentioned that you had to chat to your proctor during like one section at one point. Like, what were some of the reasons you might like end up having to talk to your proctor like while writing?
Dude, I have no clue. I mean, Brandon knows. I like panic emailed him after the test because I was like, what just happened? Dude, my proctor like took over my screen and opened a new tab and then like put in a new URL, and I was like fighting with him for the mouse, and I was like, hey, can you like stop the clock? Like there are 3 minutes left in this section and I need to like finish the section. So like the reasons are like, I don't know. Like he was like, I can no longer see your screen. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't like, nothing happened for me. I'm just like doing the test. So like the reasons could be anything, but like my neighbor started playing a podcast during one of my tests, and I chatted with my proctor and I was like, is it allowed for me to like knock on the wall to like try to signal to my neighbor to like turn this podcast down? So like, it could be anything, but like the chat is still available like during the section.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and just a human, oh, sorry, Lily.
No, I'll go for it.
Just like a human thing there, especially with proctors, they're just people and they're just employees trying to get through their day. So do yourself a favor, do them a favor by thanking them for their time, by thanking them for their generosity. Even if you're pissed and even if you're annoyed, even if you're anxious, just go through it and do it, because it basically just establishes that you see them and they're literally unseen people. You never know who they are. So because you're going through that process, do that. And I found myself having I think I've never had an issue with ProctorU, but I found myself having a better relationship with the ProctorU proctors themselves, just taking the minute to say, hey, thanks for your time today. I appreciate what you're doing. That's all.
Oh, that was exactly what I was going to say, is the nicer you are to them, the more likely they are to be nice to you. So just be very polite. And then also just as soon as you kind of get connected with them, to keep that open line of communication and ask, hey, will you stop the clock? If you need to talk to me, do all of those things. It should help to make it a little bit less weird, but also hopefully if they are kind of iffy on, maybe flagging your test or something strange happens, it might just go better if you have a better rapport with them. So, all right. With all of that being said, folks, I think we're going to call it here. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. But an extra big thank you to my co-hosts for all of their advice. I learned something new every single time that we do this. It's one of my favorite things at the Demon. So appreciate all of you. Appreciate you students. Good luck again. And hopefully we'll see you in class. Good night, guys.
Thank you guys so much.